sudden change in the program. One of our speakers was not able to make it, and so Ned Woodhouse, another political scientist from the STS department, has kindly agreed to fill in and explain to us a few different varieties of democracy. Thank you, Ned.
In the 25 years or so that I've taught here, I've not known a president that I enthusiastically support. So in that sense, there's nothing new about the current environment. Provosts I've liked fractionally better, and deans slightly better than that, and chairs a little bit better yet. But I've had issues with all of them in my role as a professor. As a person, as far as I can recall, I've found something to like about each of them as individuals. But as a professor, I chafe under the strictures of their authority. That's not simply a personal reaction. That's a built-in constraint that those who would be interested in the future of democratic civilization would do well to ponder, that there's an inherent and perhaps desirable tension between administration and democracy. Administration is partly about hierarchy. Not entirely, but it's an essential feature of it. Division of labor, and so on. Democracy is more about shared authority, more about negotiation among those who are roughly equal. Administrators ask for input to their decisions. Were I an administrator, I might behave in a way not too different from that. It goes with the role to some extent. The individual can soften or harshen the way the role is performed, but there's a built-in tension, and hence it's appropriate that there should sometimes be tense times in any institution. Questions arise, however, as to how those tensions can be well managed rather than poorly managed, and how over a period of time some combination of personal development of the citizens and the administrators, in the sense that they are administrators, not citizens, temporarily when they are in certain roles, how can we develop so that we're better able to handle those tensions? What preparation is needed? In my experience on the Faculty Senate, I have not found most of my fellow faculty members to be terribly well prepared for democratic governance. By motivation, in terms of their willingness to spend time for the public good, in competence, in terms of simple matters like understanding Robert's rules and how to play their role when speaking or not, and in some other ways. The administrators I've found likewise to have similar difficulties that go with their roles. How could we do better? A different way to put that is that whatever the shortcomings of this institution might be, I suspect that there is a greater difference between democracy as exists now anywhere on the planet and the democracy to which we might aspire than there is between the faculty and administration here. No one knows how to build a democracy for the 22nd century and beyond, but many of us could have some ideas and could begin to practice those better than we heretofore have done. Here, some of the elementary considerations would be, what role ought students to play in governance? There was a famous book of the late 60s called The Student as Nigger by Jerry Farber. I think that some of the items in that book are still worth looking at and reflecting on. What about the staff? In some respects, they rank even lower, I think, than students or faculty. Troy residents, perhaps a notch even below that. And then there's the humanity most generally affected by what goes on at a premier technological university. There was an article in the paper this week, I don't know whether it was correct or not, often reporters get stories wrong, but it claimed that an RPI professor was developing 3D rangefinders for military lasers. If that's correct, there's every reason to believe those will be sold to third world dictators within a couple of decades to oppress their citizens. Do those citizens deserve to have some say in whether or not that research is conducted? And if so, how on earth could that be made feasible? Trenchant, deep puzzles, not things that are going to be resolved by anybody's clever statements today, not by my deepest thinking. I don't know how to do it. I do know that it ought to deserve a much higher place on the human agenda than it presently has. One of the last questioners asked about, so why not autarky? The reason, if you have my handout, is listed at the top under the main point. And I'll read it for economy. Decisions become more intelligent as fewer important considerations are neglected. Decisions become more intelligent as fewer important considerations are neglected. Because everyone has biases, and those holding institutional roles have systematic blinders, well-rounded consideration of problems and solutions requires interaction among affected interests, relatively equally represented. The more widely authority is shared, other things equal, the less likely anyone can impose an unintelligent course of action. The more widely authority is shared, the less likely an unintelligent course of action can be imposed. The potential intelligence of democracy, in other words, is a story that deserves to be told right up there and perhaps above the story about democratic rights and even perhaps liberty. Fact is, we need to consult with each other because all of us are foolish and ignorant and largely incompetent when it comes to projecting very much that's outside of our immediate field of learning, what we've learned from experience. Democracy is a hedge against that